3 years ago, Tony Khan was a guest on Ariel Helwani's show, and it did not go well. Tony mostly turned it into a fluff piece. He gave Ariel very little in the way of actual answers or any news. After which, Ariel called it one of the most frustrating and not so fun interviews that he has ever done. He said Tony didn't want to answer anything, even just how he feels. Like, how do you feel about CM Punk? How do you feel about what went down at Brawl Out? Because this was only a couple of months after all that stuff went down. And of course, he was going to ask questions about it. I mean, any self-respecting person who gets an interview with Tony Khan a few months after something like that goes down is it's journalism malpractice if they don't try to ask something about it, unless they're just told in advance by the PR person, hey, don't ask about this. But like questions about MJF, there was some controversy around him. This was, when he was supposedly signing a new deal. He had been gone for a few months after the stuff with him and Wardlow. He didn't want to talk about it. Questions about Saraya's role in the company going forward. He didn't want to talk about it. Any conversations that he may have had with Bray Wyatt, because Bray had just come back to WWE, he wouldn't talk about it. Is it surreal to see Cody Rhodes back in WWE? Tony wouldn't answer. Like, if you sit for an interview like that, you have to be prepared to give the person something. He gave Ariel nothing. Like, Tony Khan did not come off well. And Ariel Helwani came off just as bad in the way that he reacted to all of this. He called AEW fans freakazoids on social media. And believe me, there are definitely freakazoids out there. I call them sickos because that's what Tony Khan calls them. The AEW diehards. He literally said, I book wrestling for the sickos because that's what I am and that's who I care about. Which I think was a play off of a Callahan Auto Parts comment in the movie Tommy Boy. But that's what he said, which, by the way, that's something he and I have in common. We both love that movie. But that really sums up his whole worldview when it comes to wrestling. He books for the sickos because he himself is a sicko. He is a diehard wrestling fan who has a very particular set of likes when it comes to wrestling, and it's reflected in how he books his shows. But Ariel Helwani calling their fans freakazoids did not do him any favors when he already had people accusing him of carrying water for WWE, right? Because he has a past working relationship with Nick Khan. And he also said that if you think the AEW product is better than the WWE product, and this was in 2022, he said, if you believe that, you're a liar. Right? So nobody came off well in this. So then a few months later, when Ariel popped up on SmackDown as their Canadian correspondent one week, Tony lost his shit. He tweeted him, you're a fraud. You're as legitimate a reporter as Tony Schiavone. And Ariel shot back telling Schiavone not to listen to the Snowman. You're still a legend in my book. Now, Tony Khan has gotten better since then at not starting flame wars on social media, at least not on his main account. I'm sure he's having fun on his burner. All that to say, though, there was no love between Tony Khan and Ariel Helwani, which is why I was very surprised to see Tony Khan in studio with Ariel Helwani on his show on Tuesday. As the polar ice caps have melted, so too has the ice between the two of them. And I watched the interview, and Tony still gives a lot of long-winded answers to very simple questions. It's just the way he speaks. And he's always in promoter mode on these things, which you would expect him to be, because he is a promoter, but I thought he came across well. I thought it was a much better interview than the previous one. There were still a lot of non-answers to certain questions that you would not expect him to have answers to, or you wouldn't expect him to be totally transparent about. There's a difference. Again, the first time that these guys spoke, there were certain things where Tony was asked about his feelings. Not even necessarily like, take us into the room and tell us what was going on. There were probably legal reasons that Tony couldn't answer some of those questions. But there were questions that he absolutely could have been more open about, even if it was just about his feelings on certain things, right? It was very frustrating that he wasn't. He was giving us nothing. Here, though, anything where he gave non-answers, it felt like, there were questions where it's like, he probably can't answer that question right now. I wouldn't expect him to have an answer about this or this or this. Like the question that Ariel asked him about the rumors of a potential Warner Brothers Discovery sale. And Tony got hit with this again at the Scrum last night. And he was asked if he's worried about how that might affect AEW. And he said, I feel really great about AEW's relationship with Warner Brothers Discovery. I think it's a great situation for us that we're one of those strong franchises on multiple channels and properties. I feel like no matter what happens in the future, we will be a really important part of that. And also for different media properties, thankfully, because I'm on the NFL Fan Engagement and Major Events Committee and have a lot of experience in football and in the NFL and in the Premier League. And now in AEW, dealing with a lot of media partners, I have strong relationships with almost every media property out there. And it became a lot more likely this week that if anyone buys Warner Brothers Discovery, it's going to be Paramount Skydance and the Ellison family. And they may even have some Saudi investment money to do it. I think all of this is just generally terrible. But, money talks, and it'll have the easiest path to approval with friends in high places. So they have to be the front runner right now. They're also the only one seemingly interested in the entire company and not just picking off pieces of it like, the streaming assets or the movie studios. They want everything. They want the cable channels, especially the cable channels. They want all of it. But what else is Tony supposed to say here? Every time he gets asked about this, right? Nothing is official yet. There's a lot of moving parts. He has a good relationship with the current management team there. There's no reason to think otherwise. They got their big media rights deal, right, which is worth somewhere in the $600 million range. And until such time that someone buys it and they replace the people in charge, there's really nothing for him to say. Now, he does make a point to say that with all of his connections, he's got strong relationships with almost every media property out there. The problem is WWE is in business with almost every media property out there at this point, and that closes AEW off to a lot of them. And he knows that, but there's nothing else really for him to say about it. I'm sure he is concerned about a possible change, but it does him no good to speak publicly about it. And he said on the Full Gear media call on Thursday, he has to be careful with how he talks about this because it involves people's jobs. Deadline reported on Thursday that Comcast, which has deals with WWE, Netflix, which also works with WWE, and Paramount, which does not work with WWE, and they're the favorite to win in the end, they have all formally submitted non-binding, and that's the key right now, non-binding bids to acquire all or part of Warner Brothers Discovery. And they say there will be another round when bidders are going to be asked if they want to submit final binding offers. So things are getting serious now. Warner Brothers Discovery thinks the sale process could be wrapped up by late December. And then it would take at least a year to be approved by regulators. So again, this is something that won't even be official for at least a year. I'm not sure what else he can say about it publicly. Now, Ariel asked him about the decision to air footage of the CM Punk Jack Perry altercation backstage at Wembley in 2023. He aired the security camera footage, if you remember, on Dynamite. That was in April of 2024. Very clearly in response to the comments that CM Punk made on Ariel's show. It was like a week before. It was very clear why Tony decided to air that footage. It was in direct response to Punk saying mean things about him in AEW. And he figured, hey, it could pop a big number for Dynamite, which it did. They did over 800,000 viewers for that show that night. A number that they did not hit for the rest of that year, and they have not hit since. Now they're on Max, but Tony claims he doesn't know what the Max numbers are. Right? They're doing great, though. They're doing great. He doesn't know what the numbers are, but trust me, bro, we're doing great. Anyway, he defended the decision to air the footage in this way. He said, I didn't necessarily agree with the description of how it all happened. I didn't necessarily agree with everything that was said in that interview about how things went down. But also, it's a TV show, and it did a very strong number. So, for many reasons, I think that it made sense. And it was a thing that was advertised, and it got a lot of attention that did a very strong number. And also, it's in the eye of the beholder. So, that was a terrible answer. He explained it away by saying, well, it did a strong number. Yes, it did a strong number showing a guy who doesn't even work for your company anymore placing one of your current talents in a front face lock. Like if Jack Perry double-legged him to the ground and started pounding on him, or if he knocked him out with a punch like Joey Styles did to JBL that one time. God, I wish that was on film. You know what? I would say it would be worth it to air that on TV and help get Jack Perry over and also kind of stick it to CM Punk if he got knocked out with one punch. The pettiness in me, I feel like, wouldn't be able to resist. Now, I wouldn't wait 8 months to do it, but at least there it's like, okay, this is going to make the other guy look like a bitch, and it might actually make our guy look badass. So fuck it, air the footage. All this did was give Punk airtime on 2 different shows in the same week. You know, I get that he felt like Punk lied about aspects of what went down and he felt like he had to respond, but he really didn't. He could have just left well enough alone. It ended up doing more damage to them than anything else. And Ariel then asked if there's anything specific that he wants to refute about what Punk had to say. And he said, I think the tape spoke for itself. And I think that I didn't agree with how it happened. And obviously it was a major part of why things were no longer able to continue with us, even though I would have liked to have been able to. And it's clear that I wanted to reconcile and do those things. I think AEW is doing really well right now, and I'm really happy with what the people on the shows are doing. It wasn't the first time that he and I disagreed about something, and it may not ever be the last. And that's okay. But I had tried to reconcile, and I wanted to find a way for everybody to be able to work together, and that did not work. And that's okay. It seems like everybody is happier and doing better right now. I know in AEW right now, everybody is really happy. And that was a fine diplomatic answer. Everyone seems happier being away from each other. And just leave it at that. Although when he says that, you know, he had tried to reconcile, wanted to find a way for everybody to work together, splitting the rosters and just kind of putting these guys in one corner and Punk and his people in the other, that was never going to work. That was never, ever going to work. And if that was all that he planned on doing, it was bound to blow up at some point anyway, because that just always sounded like a terrible idea. Unless you got everybody in the room to hash things out, that was always going to be a terrible idea. Now, Tony was asked about the photo backstage at Saturday night's main event with Cody Rhodes, CM Punk, Jade Cargill, and Ricky Saints all posing with their championships. And what do they all have in common? They all went from AEW to WWE. And I thought Tony gave a very disciplined answer on this. He said, it did make me smile because it reminded me of Double or Nothing 2020, the first pandemic pay-per-view. We put on this great pay-per-view and Cody won the TNT title and Mox retained the AEW World title against the late, great Mr. Brody Lee. May he rest in peace. And after the show, Cody and Mox are in this area of Daly's place that is kind of the one communal area. Cody and Mox took a photo and I thought it was interesting. It just reminded me, shows how far in the mirror, but I remember the photo that Cody and Mox took, and in that moment, I think I took it on my phone. And Ariel asked if he felt like the photo was a shot at him, and he said he doesn't. I have relationships with all 4 of them, and they're very different. I could talk for 2 hours about each of them and why I liked them and why I thought they were great in AEW. And we could talk about all of their matches, or I could talk about how much I like them all as people. But you know, they're not all wrestling in AEW anymore. But to be completely honest with you, I just thought that photo, and it made me think of Double or Nothing 2020 and being there in Jacksonville and taking that photo on my phone and remembering that night and thinking, man, it's crazy how 5.5 years have flown by. I thought that was the best possible answer he could give there. It was absolutely done as a shot at him. As soon as it was posted, the Tony fumbled post started. So they knew what they were doing when they took that photo and they posted that photo. I thought he handled it well. I thought he handled this well, too. He was asked about WWE counter-programming lots of big AEW shows this year by scheduling events on the same day, and if he thinks it's being done on purpose. He said, I do think it's being done on purpose, and I understand it, and it's part of wrestling, and I think we've seen a lot of it, but I think other wrestling promotions that have been the challenger wrestling brand in our lifetime have seen a lot of it. Jim Crockett Promotions, which was the forerunner to WCW, saw a lot of this. I do think that we've seen that kind of counter-programming and those things, and I understand, in looking back at wrestling history, kind of expect that. And Ariel asked if he finds it frustrating, but he took a more positive point of view on it. He said, I think it's okay because for us, it's always worked out and we're in a great position. It hasn't ever been a thing where it's cost us anything. And even when you do something like AEW All in Texas, where we do the show in the afternoon, it really worked out for us great, and it was one of the best days in the history of the company. Asked if he takes it personally, Tony said, it's something that's part of the wrestling business, and I definitely don't take it personally. I think it's no more personal to me than it was towards Jim Crockett, or even maybe less so than it was with Ted Turner, or similar amounts as with Ted Turner. But definitely, I think all of us have seen that kind of counter programming and could speak to that. And certainly with AEW, I'm very proud that we continue to really run strong and be that great challenger brand in pro wrestling. Does it frustrate him? Of course it does. Of course it does. But he can't sell it. Like, the worst thing he could do, if he answers that question, the worst thing he could do is say, yeah, it really does frustrate me. Man, it really gets under my skin. Like, when you let a bully know that it gets to you, what do? They keep bullying you because it's fun. They're trying to get a reaction out of you. If you ignore them, eventually they go away and they bully someone else. In this case, WWE doesn't have anyone else to bully, so they're going to keep doing it to AEW. But I understand why, Tony would not want to admit, yeah, it really does bother me. That's what WWE wants to hear, right? They get off on it. We all know that he's got to be frustrated by it. You think he wanted to move all out from 8 o'clock at night to 3 o'clock in the afternoon and piss off all the people who already bought tickets after they went on sale? Like, for me, it didn't affect me. If anything, it was a big improvement moving the show to earlier that day. Otherwise, it would have run head-to-head with WrestlePalooza the whole way through. But if I bought a ticket and I was sitting in the 5th row and assuming it was going to be an 8 o'clock show, and all of a sudden I find out, the show's been bumped up by 5 hours, maybe I had something else going on that day. Maybe I'm working that day, and all of a sudden, I can't go to the show. You think he wanted to do that? Of course not. He made a calculated business move. He made a business decision that moving the show was the way to go so that they wouldn't be up against WWE's debut on ESPN. And it may happen again in the future. He'll schedule a show at 3 and WWE will suddenly schedule theirs at 4. Right? Then he'll have to shift his back to 8. That sort of thing is going to continue to happen into next year. They're going to keep playing games, but he cannot admit that because then they win. So he gave a very diplomatic answer, more so than he probably would have 2 or 3 years ago. Remember, he was angry at that brawl-out scrum after Punk left, and he was sitting there all by himself talking about the counter-programming that happened that weekend. That was Labor Day weekend. That was the first time they did it. Right? They encroached on his turf, and he was pissed, and he let everybody know it. This was a more disciplined Tony Khan than the one that we saw that night. Now, there was a weird analogy that he used when he was talking about getting input from different people creatively, kind of like an ensemble. But the final decisions, they're all his. He compared it to the scene in the original Ghostbusters movie where Ray and Winston are driving alone over the Brooklyn Bridge having a conversation, which is actually one of the best scenes probably in the whole movie, honestly. But it's the one where they're having a conversation about like Bible verses. Like Winston's asking him about, do you read the Bible and do you know this verse? The dead rising from the grave. So I guess his point was that it was 2 characters in the movie who don't have any other scenes together alone. He somehow equates this to getting input from people he wouldn't ordinarily get input from behind the scenes. Like, it's a weird example. I'm fascinated by how this man's brain works. But I do like his taste in film. Right? Ghostbusters was a staple of my childhood. When he was asked about wanting to keep the pay-per-views priced for families, he said, "It really means a lot to me because I was a kid and my parents would not let me buy every single wrestling pay-per-view. So I really appreciate whenever people do put the money in for every show. And that's why I try to put so much into every pay-per-view and make it feel like you really got your money's worth out of this show." And that is the best insight yet into why he feels the need to stuff so much into these pay-per-views. And we end up with these marathon shows like the one we had last night that doesn't go off the air until 12:30 in the morning. When WWE started offering their pay-per-views effectively for free on the WWE network, they killed the pay-per-view model as far as wrestling goes. Like, it's hard for a lot of fans, if you watch both products, to reconcile getting the shows for free on one hand and then shelling out $40 or $50 on the other. Right? Oh, how come they can't do the same thing? Well, because they still make a lot of money on those pay-per-views. That's why. One pay-per-view can net AEW as much as $10 million. And maybe they don't pocket all of that money, but they end up with a good chunk of it. Like, pay-per-view is a major part of their business model. That's why you don't just get the shows for free with your HBO Max subscription. right? You pay for them on top of your monthly fee, but you can get a $10 discount. So instead of $50, you pay $40. Unless you watch on Triller with a VPN, then you can get them for less. Hint, hint. But he feels like, if people are dipping into their pocket to pay for these shows, he's going to overload them on wrestling. And I get it, but it's too much. It's just too much. I feel bad for some of these wrestlers that have to go out there at 11:30 at night, and they're not even in the main event. And it's like pulling teeth to get a reaction out of the fans. Like we saw that with the women's match last night, the women's title match. But if he insists on these 5-hour-plus shows, starting them earlier in the afternoon makes them a little more palatable. And I'll have a little bit of news on that later. Ariel brought up their penchant for blood and violence on the shows. And he asked whether there's ever been a moment that he felt like, you know what, that went too far. And Tony cited Darby Allin's bump off the ladder through the glass during Sting's retirement match last year. He said, I think he is really brilliant as a wrestler. He also takes these chances. I think normally they are really calculated chances. The one that I thought was too far, and I will say this to him, and I have said this to him 100 times, in Sting's final match with the glass in Greensboro, off the ladder through the glass, that was the one where I thought maybe it was too much. And it wasn't really the way that it was described. It was pretty brutal. And that was the one afterwards where I said, you are so brilliant about these chances, but this is the first time ever where I have probably thought it was way too much. He took a huge risk, and it worked out. Sounds like the way Darby pitched it to him was different than the way it actually unfolded. That's what I'm gleaning from what Tony is saying there. But one thing that is very clear from this interview is he gives the talent a lot of creative freedom and a lot of leeway when it comes to spots like that in their matches. I get the sense that very seldomly does he tell someone no. I don't need to have a backstage source to tell me that either. I just watch the shows. And I get the sense he very seldomly tells someone no. And he probably should, because one of these days, Darby or someone else is going to try something really wacky and it won't work out. Tony says he took a risk and it worked out. Yeah, this time. But when you keep upping the ante like that, you're just asking for a different outcome. Yeah, I went back and I rewatched that spot, by the way. You can see the people in the front row trying to shield their eyes and their faces from all the glass that went flying when he went through that pane of glass. Like, it could have turned out very badly for one of the fans on that spot, not just Darby. Like, if some kid got glass in his eye, like if Darby wants to do absolutely dumb shit and maim himself, then hey, go for it. But you know what? It's different when you're that close to the fans. Like, if it was in the ring, that would have been one thing. If it was by the entrance tunnels, like where they did that spot in Blood and Guts where he went through the flaming tables, that's another thing. Doing it not 5 feet from the fans in the front row, that's very, very stupid. Now, Tony was also asked about plans for AEW Shockwave. Remember that was going to be a show? They filed a trademark on the AEW Shockwave name in September of last year, and it was rumored to be a possible new show on Fox. Even Swerve Strickland bought into it. He was at an event here last year. They had SneakerCon at the stadium in Coney Island where the Brooklyn Cyclones play. And he was telling people that AEW, we just got on Fox. SmackDown's leaving Fox and we're taking Fox. TNT, TBS, and Fox. We got all three of them, he said. It didn't quite work out that way. Swerve got swerved. So then they got into a trademark dispute with Billy Corgan because the NWA already had a series called Shockwave back in 2020. And now Tony says he's not planning on using that name anymore. And AEW actually abandoned their trademark application on the name this week. But he said, well, it's just an idea. I file lots of different names and ideas of shows and things like that. And that was a name that I actually, at the time, did not know anybody else had used. I'm probably not going to do it. I had a really nice talk with Billy Corgan, who owns the NWA. I like Billy, and even before I became a wrestling promoter, I had met him, and I think he's just a great artist, and I like him. So when I talked to him on the phone, I said, if that's a show that you might do again, if that's something you want to do and you did it first, then you can do that. That's fine. And he said, oh, that's great. I appreciate that. So that was nice. The reason they spoke on the phone was less about Shockwave and more about this whole national title fiasco after they announced they were adding a national championship. Remember Mike Mondo, who was the current NWA national champion? He hit back at them on social media for acting like the national title's been dead for 40 years. He said that he confirmed with Billy that the lineage for their new title is intended to be separate from the existing national title. I truly don't think he even knew the NWA national title was still a thing. I really don't. I really don't. Like, it's like the Shockwave thing. He seems to just do things. He's like the Joker in The Dark Knight, right? I just do things. He trademarks the Shockwave name without bothering to see if anyone else is using it. He creates a new national title and talks about its legacy in the NWA without knowing the NWA still has a national title. He signs Andrade to a deal without realizing that he's still under a non-compete with WWE, right? He's very impulsive. Now, on Chris Jericho's status, he called Jericho one of his favorite wrestlers ever, said he would love to see him back. The door is always open, but he would not confirm when Jericho's contract is up. I believe Jericho himself has said his deal is up at the end of this year, in the past at some point. But he said some of it just comes down to working out the dates, I guess, in terms of the number of dates that are negotiated for him to appear. I mean, that man hasn't been on television since April. If he was coming back, he'd have been back by now. Like, I would be stunned if we don't see him back on WWE television before WrestleMania. But until he makes up his mind what he wants to do, there's not much for Tony Khan to say. He knows WWE has interest in bringing him back. He knows Jericho is open to returning there. It's like the Jade Cargill thing. Like, he asked her for a number. He wanted to keep Jade. Give me a number. What's it going to take? She came back to him with a number. He claims he met that number, and she still left and went to WWE. Sometimes it's not just about the money. Like, when you have your heart set on something, there's not a whole lot that you can do. Jericho has done all he can do with AEW, at least on screen. He can help behind the scenes, but he's not ready to hang it up yet and go behind the scenes. His in-ring career is not over yet. In WWE, there's lots of new faces for him to work with. There's a Hall of Fame induction. It's like a fresh start because he hasn't been there for so long. Like Chris Jericho against LA Knight at WrestleMania. You watch. If I had to predict what his match and program is going to be for that show, that's it right there. Now, on the rumors of Adam Copeland potentially being John Cena's final opponent and whether WWE ever reached out to inquire about using Copeland, Tony said they did not, but never say never in wrestling, because I would imagine they could always extend Cena's end date past the end of the year. But no, Adam is going to be here with us through the year. Adam Copeland is a huge part of AEW, and I have so much respect for him. I really, really like Adam a lot, and I'm glad to have him here. Even though he's away filming, he's still with us and will continue to be. I never thought the WWE would reach out to them. They never had any interest in using Copeland in that spot. I'm sure of it. I mean, look, the reason they didn't sign Copeland and retain him, which opened him up to potentially signing with AEW in the first place, is because he had a certain vision for what he wanted to do in wrestling, and WWE had a different vision, and they didn't really have a whole lot of, plans and ideas for him to be in that top mix. So he bounced and he went somewhere else. I don't think they're clamoring to get Adam Copeland back just because he and Cena used to be, big rivals. Oh, we got to get Copeland back. So, of course, they never reached out. If there were any discussions internally, I'm sure they were brief. If they did reach out to Tony, given how adversarial they are towards him, I would have told them to fuck off. That's what I would have said. But he knows full well they're not extending John Cena past next month. So it's a very safe answer. It's safe for him to go, well, never say never. They could always extend Cena beyond next month. No, they're not. And he knows they're not. He knows he doesn't have to worry about that. Copeland will be back very soon to go after FTR with Christian. On Andrade and his status with AEW, he was very careful in the way he spoke about it because it is clearly a legal issue. He regurgitated what he's already said before about being on good terms with Andrade and that he hopes to work with him again when he's free to do so. When Ariel asked if Andrade misrepresented his status to him after leaving WWE, Tony said he couldn't speak to that. And again, what's he going to say here? AEW looked just as bad as Andrade did for putting him on television and having him lay out one of their top guys without doing their due diligence and knowing that they could legally use him It's like arrive, beat up Kenny Omega, and leave. That could be the new shirt they sell on WWE Shop if they force him to come back. On Miro, Tony said, I think he and I just at times had different visions of things. That's okay because everyone is entitled to different opinions and different ideas. We just kind of drifted into some different ideas of what we should be doing, and that's okay. And he noted that Miro worked in WWE before, and clearly that was a good experience for him. So clearly he was excited to go back and did go back. I wish him the best. That whole situation is just weird. Like, he missed so much time. I know he had some injuries that he took care of. And then there were rumors that when he initially broke up with CJ Perry, I mean, they're back together now, but they had broken up for a while, and supposedly he moved back to Bulgaria. So, he was going through some shit for a period of time, but he was there for like 5 years. It doesn't account for all the other time that he just sat at home doing nothing. And everyone's speculating, he doesn't want to do jobs or, it's creative differences. Yeah, I don't know about him not doing jobs, but it sounds like there were some big time creative differences there. But he just sat at home and just wasted away for all that time, and Tony continued to pay him, and he wasn't doing anything. Like, there's blame to go around on both sides there. Whether Miro refused to job to certain people, I don't know. I mean, he's lost plenty of matches since going back to WWE, but WWE runs a tight ship. They're not going to tolerate that type of crap. He knows his place there. On Britt Baker, he said that he would love to have her back and is just waiting for the right time. The right time would have been Pittsburgh 2 months ago. The fact that he didn't bring her back there means one of two things, okay? Either he really isn't too keen on bringing Britt Baker back, or it's a health issue. And he did say that he wants to make sure she's 100%. That felt like a tell to me. Remember, Britt suffered a mini stroke 2 years ago. Now, she later said that she made a full recovery. She had no lingering issues from it. But you never know. She also wrecked her back at one point. So it's possible there may be more going on there than just, she had heat over something and he doesn't want to bring her back. Maybe. But saying he wants to make sure she's 100% makes it sound like it might be something else. But the saddest part of the interview, easily, came at the end when Ariel asked him about Adam Cole. And you could see like the life just like drain from his face. Like the mood shifted. There was a pause before he answered the question, and he had just the saddest look on his face. Because Cole, he's been out of the ring since July, right? He pulled himself off that All-In card before his TNT title match against Kyle Fletcher. And then he cut that promo on the pay-per-view where he got all emotional, and it sure felt like a retirement speech without actually saying that word. I don't think he really knew for sure. There was talk that he intended to go out there and retire, and he was going to cut a retirement speech, and Tony Khan talked him out of it and said, look, why don't we just wait and see, where the dust settles on this? Don't be too reactionary. So he went out there and cut a retirement promo without actually calling it a retirement promo. But clearly, Cole knew that was a very real possibility. But anyway, Tony said, I think it would have to be the right situation for Adam to wrestle again. I think it's at least possible we could keep, or we would keep Adam as part of the family. I want to get to where he feels good about traveling and doing things every week again. I have been open with him that when he's ready, there's always a role in AEW for him. Now, before that recent concussion that he suffered, Tony Khan, that is, had said he was very excited about what Cole had done this year so far. He came back from another injury, the ankle injury, and he said that he was very happy that Cole admitted to him that he wasn't feeling good about wrestling anymore, when he woke up that day. He pulled himself off the card. He said if he ever did want to wrestle again, and it was the right situation and everyone could wrap their heads around it, so to speak, I think it could make a lot of sense. If you listen to his words there and you look at his body language, he knows that Adam Cole is probably done. Like, he knows. He even said, like, he's done commentary for us before and he's hosted things for us before, and so that could be a role for him. He was talking about it like life after wrestling. Like Adam Cole, Jay White, and Wardlow, they are the unlucky triad in that company. Their runs have been sabotaged by injury issues and bad booking in Wardlow's case. But Adam Cole in particular, like if you look at his history there, he suffered a concussion in his match with Samoa Joe at Double or Nothing in 2022. That was in the finals of the Owen Hart tournament that Cole won. Not even a month later is when he suffered that second concussion in the four-way, the IWGP title match at Forbidden Door. That was when things got really scary, and he missed like 9 months. That's 2 concussions in a very short period of time. He was seeing a brain doctor 3 times a week. He took a brain test at one point where they told him most athletes score 120 or higher. You scored a 38. If he had scored 8 points lower than that, he would not have been able to legally drive. Okay, that's how bad things got. I mean, that's terrifying. And at that point, you start to worry about your long-term quality of life, right? It's why WWE forced Bryan Danielson out of the ring and Christian Cage out of the ring because of concussions. It's the same reason Corey Graves is doing commentary now and not wrestling. But he was able to make it back, and that's when the Brochacho stuff with MJF took off. And he got to the main event of their first ever Wembley Stadium show. 75,000 people. He's in the main event against MJF for the world title. And then just when things were really getting going for him, and it's clear as day the plan was to put the AEW World Championship on him when he turned on MJF, he breaks his ankle. He breaks his ankle in like the weirdest way. He jumps off the ramp on his way down to the ring. MJF was wrestling Samoa Joe. He jumps off the ramp because they have a fucking ramp on their way to the ring. And he jumps off the ramp. It could not have been more than 3 or 4 feet. The man's ankle bone disintegrated. That's how bad the injury was. He needed to have bone donated from a cadaver. That kept him out for over a year. Then he comes back, he wins the TNT title, and then came concussion number 3. And it was the morning of one of their biggest shows ever. He calls Tony and tells him, I don't feel too good. And thank God he did, because you know what? In another era, at another time, that is not something that would have been done. You go out there and you would gut it out, do the honors, drop the belt, because he was probably losing to Kyle Fletcher that night, drop the belt, and then go home. But he knew enough about his body and what he went through the last time that it scared the shit out of him. And he knew it was a bad idea for him to be in the ring. And I'm sure it scared him to death also. I mean, Kyle Fletcher would not have held back as far as fucking brain busters. And I mean, that's most of his fucking offense, is dropping people on top of their head. And the prospect of going through what he went through after the second concussion, right, or something worse, he didn't want that. As it is, it sounds like he still can't even fly. So it's awful. I would hope Tony Khan could use him in another capacity if he can't wrestle again, because there's any number of things that Adam Cole could be doing for them. I think people just want to see him healthy and able to live a normal life, right? Same with Big E. It sucks that he was never able to get back in the ring after he broke his neck, but by his own account, he feels great. You know, he still works out. He could live a normal life. He's pain-free. And he still works for them doing pre-show hosting gigs. At least he can still contribute. But it just gets to a point where, is it even worth it to get back in the ring and risk your health? That, to me, was the saddest and the realest part of the entire interview. Like, you could see the empathy on his face and how just devastated he is for that guy. So I thought it was a good interview overall. If you were looking for headlines, you didn't get a whole lot, but you're not going to with Tony Khan, right? You're not going to with most promoters in that environment. Ariel tries to pull it out of him. I think Tony had that figured out. He gave him what he could, but I think he handled it well, and he just came off a lot better than he did the first time.